Ladies and gentlemen, come one, come all, welcome to the 2022 Electromagnetic Universe World Expo. Our next presenter is Shifu Ramon. Shifu is a father, multiple business owner, martial arts instructor, and healer in traditional Chinese medicine. He has a background in electrical engineering from University of Kentucky. He is from Kentucky, where he works on the Hidden Kentucky Project in tandem with the Ancient Kentucky Historical Association. He is author of over 80 alt-stream papers in extended plasma electromagnetic cosmology and a pioneer of open source cosmology at academia.eu/Shifu Karega. He is the host of Electric Pulse on Rumble. You can find his shows on The Leak Project, where I am also often the co-host, on Wednesdays every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern with Rex. That's Rex Bear from The Leaks Project. As well as archived on the Gateway, EPEMC
Okay, hello everybody. It's Ramon Carriaga with the Electric Pulse. We have our own show on Rumble. Usually meets about once a week. Buddy's asked me to do some preparations for this coming conference. So one of the things I thought would be useful is to go over the extended plasma electromagnetic cosmology. So if you type in www.epemcgateway.com, you will come up with the third generation of our gateway. Just FYI, the original version is still there. It's deprecated. It's an old, antiquated Google site, a classic Google site. We don't know when it'll go away. The original vision of these gateways was to be a research platform. The second edition ended up being a little too heavy in terms of all the different components. It is an idea that's extended out for the future. But so when you type in the EPEMCgateway.com, it takes you to this page. And in particular, what you're going to want to be able to do is click this tab up here, this EPEMC itself. Of course, there's a drop-down menu, but if you click the tab, it takes you to my paper directory. So let's talk a little bit about extended plasma electromagnetic cosmology. First of all, the definition for plasma electromagnetic cosmology is that we don't take sides with the plasma theorists, the electric theorists, or the magnetic only theorists. What we say is that there is a embodiment of the entire force that comes with all three, the triquetra motif, coming together and actually making it into one thing. One of the hallmarks of that theory is, well, there's two hallmarks. One is that the PEM force itself is the unified ether field that we've been looking for. We've already had it for all this time. But because of axiom 2, which is that it's a fractal and it changes its appearance depending on the scale that you're working on, it all looks different. So the strong force appears to be different than van der Waals forces, which appear to be different than cavitation and superconductivity. But actually, all of these are parts and parcel of the same one thing, which is the PEM force. Now, extended plasma electromagnetic cosmology allows us to talk about the things that are beyond. So comparative mythology, electrogeology, plasmaglyphics, arthurology, Atlantology, aliens, if you wish. I do have a paper in which I cover what can and can't be done with the pseudo-scientific hypothesis. There's a lot of content in this directory. Mainly, we're going to cover some of the concepts from the left column here in the EPEMC/EU column. We're also going to cover the MIMS philosophy. And then I'm going to go over a little bit of standards. For example, in the standards, when you go under volunteer and it says standards, you'll notice that one of the big things that this cosmology has been engineered to do, it's an open source cosmology, but we do expect citations because the world is now your peer. That's what social media has enabled us to do. My academia page is now in the top 0.5% on academia. People want and expect to be treated equally to these other scientists. because there's plenty of scientists that have been locked out of the journal space. They understand what we're talking about. Don't assume that the people in the mainstream don't get these complaints. They also have the same complaints. The journal system is a dying breed. It's a big money grab. And of course, if you want to read more about that, you can read this highlighted green peer review cult. Anything in green means it's a newer paper. But if you do have an excessive amount of data, my suggestion is, if you are able, open a ResearchGate account and actually put your stuff up on ResearchGate. I think that it will provide a little bit more, I guess, a reputation or expertise. Most of my stuff goes up onto academia, though. So when you open up some of these papers, let's just go through a couple of them. First of all, the initial portal wasn't actually the Google site. It was actually this EU primer that I made for helping other people. As you can see, it's quite busy. It's also deprecated. I don't update it anymore. It's a single page of links. From there, I created the Electric Universe memo, and that was in order to help people with some things, standard definitions, a little bit of information about different things inside of the EPEMC, which again, our cosmology goes all the way back before Newton. It goes back to the ancient times. But just now everything's starting to come together. And then there's this nice page with a series of links and about 9 squares here that you can go through. And that's a fine way to learn. There are a number of reasons to switch to EPEMC from whatever cosmology. First of all, like I said, it being a open source cosmology, that means that it is free to the public, and that we are providing a service to the world that is for posterity and not for self-enrichment. If you write a book, I'm going to plug my book here at the end. That's one thing. It's another thing if we are demanding that the public subsidize some kind of strange theory that can't be proven because it's a pseudoscientific hypothesis, like dark matter. However, there are lots of other reasons other than it being an open source cosmology. We have an extended chronology where we don't try to ignore Göbekli Tepe or Gunung Padang, and we're able to extend things backwards because we know that modern humans have been around for a couple 100,000 years, and that their brains have been quite capable of understanding symbology for at least 40,000 of that. There is a respect inherent in EPEMC for religio-spiritual research and even supernatural paranormal research. It is quite possible we have had interactions and interface with those things, usually via the discussion of plasmoids, but there are other ways, and I'll go over one of those. Acceptance of the cataclysmic and uniformitarian paradigm. Modular freedom here, what I mean is that you are able to work in different tranches of data, not being told, oh, you're only an archaeologist, so you can only talk about archaeology. Well, what if that archaeology actually relates directly to biology or meteorology? And you here can work in those different modes, and then they can they can intertwine via the citation scheme. Lack of the political baggage in terms of when I say politics, I'm not talking about U.S. politics. I'm talking about the peer review process and having to be in the inside, or you have to be on the bus, as I've heard it put. No publishing containers, and we emphasize Occam's razor. Now, sometimes the world is simplex, so as long as you can cite what you have, and that citation could be anything, could be ancientorigins.net all the way to Encyclopedia Britannica, anything in between. Supported bleeding edge high energy physics results, so we don't try to hide or obscure any of the results that come out. In fact, we embrace them, and that includes the images of the SGR and M87, etc., because in the end they end up supporting our paradigm. Strong foundational citations. Boundless varying projects to fill a very large vessel. Basically, there are lots of areas that have not been covered by anybody in the alt stream or the mainstream. that need to be covered. And I would emphasize to anybody who wants to volunteer, which you don't have to submit anything to me at all. You can submit your own stuff on the academia, but you need to go and visit places. So I have an entire corpus that's coming about of trip reports. These are an important part of our cosmological citation framework. And I think it's very important that we continue that effort, because being there in person, sometimes you get data that you can't get any other way. So getting off your keister, and going and visiting places, taking notes and presenting those notes, they could be even handwritten. And as long as you scan things in, then you have fulfilled the standard that is engineered in EPMC. And it is supported, via the IEEE, not directly this, but the entire cosmological framework is supported. And also Ancient American, which is a form of journal, that the diffusionism. So these are things that you're going to be able to find, I guess, allies would be sort of where I would say. And one of the other important parts about this paper, or maybe in another one, is that I talk about how the mainstream is already making the switch, but they're going to take your work and give themselves credit. This is a way to preempt that by getting your work stamped, put up on academia with citations, and cross-referenced like a mycelium web from other people who are PEMsters. Right, so we also have an FAQ, which has some of the various laws and other appendices that from earlier works attached. Back in 2019, put together a huge array of tables and figures. We may or may not put together something, again, similar to this, but you can utilize these tables and figures with their citations. You will be able to utilize those directly into your own work, is the point. So there's a lot of use there. Here in this second part of the evolution of EPMC, I cover the various iterations. We're now in the third iteration of EPMC, and there are standards listed and topics covered, and then the evolution for the EPMC has been given. It's a very short paper, probably a good idea to go over if you decide to start working under the EPMC banner. Remember, this is not a corporatized trademark. This is an open source cosmology. It's free forever for you to use. One of the great benefits of it is that it has resulted, and it's sort of birthed on its own, this entire philosophy of the MEMS philosophy. And I recommend people go through that. It's what Buddy likes to call futurization. But it's more than that too. It's a way of discussing topics that aren't exactly cosmological or scientific, but they're not exactly not that either. We also have some science fiction area, and I don't mean the alien stuff, but space work. Basically, when I say science fiction, I mean that sometimes the science hasn't yet been proven, but it's on its way to being proven. For example, the cosmic rearrangement hypothesis. And in that paper, I cover, I update from the magnetic universe theory paper where the standard model currently is in its measurements. And again, here are the citations. They're right there for you to use. You can cite them to anybody, any opponent, or anybody who might be a detractor when you present this cosmology to others. Another thing that we've engineered in this is the standard of using in the Google Docs. We're able to actually embed animated files. For example, this is the addendum to the megaphonic extension. So this is already, there was already one addendum and which I showed the now presented Paradian Thunderbolt located in Kentucky. But here I was discussing the breakdown of our previous star, and I was able to find animated files, and these animations can now show people what would happen. In this case, just talking about how three-body problems create chaotic systems, and it may be impossible for us to know exactly precisely what happened and what time, because if we're trailing behind said gas giants and they're whipping about each other, it's going to create cataclysmic options. It's also going to create instances of magnetospheric rubbing that could induce Palladian thunderbolts at really any given time. And it would seem like Zeus or Odin is just haphazardly tossing things out. And then eventually an explanation for the conjunctions that we see, the peace sign, the Awen glyph, the what's called the Lagrange solution. So I'm able to convey that using animations. That's something that I've not seen anybody else do, and it is a pretty typical part. The only thing you have to do is at the beginning of your work, just go ahead and create a bit.ly link and recommend viewing for the animations right there under your name. And it can make a difference in terms of making a beautiful paper that's conquering the solar system, which unfortunately it's so large. It's basically a book. It has these animations that really bring out the richness of the content, and you're able to I guess interact a little bit better with the person the audience that you're trying to reach. I do want to talk a little bit about the standards. We have a list of standards in EPEMC over here on the right. There's also this example of a color heat spectrum. These names are people that I greatly respect in the upper left, and I'm using them only to illustrate. As far as I'm concerned, they're all in the purple spectrum. But with spreadsheets, you can only put so many names. So the goal is to have all of these criteria fulfilled on the left. And it's very important to not be pseudoscientific. So, and we define pseudoscience, by the way, on not only here, but on the volunteer page itself. So we'll go back over to the volunteer page. And you'll see there's a paper about the benefits of switching to EPEMC. So right here, metaphysics is not pseudoscience. Pseudoscience cannot be proven or disproven, and it usually relies on a priori knowledge, models as truth, math as God, and the authority fallacy. Those are the criteria that we have set forward. So it's not just about using Occam's razor and putting up some citations. You really need to have a hypothesis that can be chewed on. And it's best if you provide your own self-critique. So for example, in my original megafauna extinction paper, I had an entire page with a series of critiques of the work contained within the work. And that gives ammo to the opponent, but at the same time, it also is honest, which is that no one can know everything. And it turns out one major facet of that paper is now deprecated in the EPEMC. We don't use the moon as the electricity source for the megafauna extinction, even though it is found in the Enuma Elish, and it is a large body, and it's something we can see, and there's obviously electric discharge machining on it. We use the death of the star as our basis for where the energy is coming from. A so-called micronova, if you will. It's not really a micronova. It was actually a bifurcation of the star. But as long as you can provide that data and that information, I think that the audience will forgive if you make mistakes. So back to the standards. The one other thing I want to point out here is that we do have some naming convention. If you come up with your own naming convention, that is completely fine. It's an open source cosmology. But if you'd like a designation series, there's a series of designations here that I've already provided. There are others that will come about, I am sure. And you can use those. It can start helping us to catalog everything and eventually get to a place where we're not only able to have a research vessel, a research site, but a catalog that people can come in and just by talking to the interface will help them to find the information. This is a thing that we want to engineer over the next 10 to 20 years. So it's not something that's right around the corner per se. There are a couple of extra features to the site. Number one, there are the shows that we're on, and to be listed as a show, you need to be active, but we'll be glad to list anyone who has an active show. There's an area for the beginners to go, and there's in the Start Learning series, there's an entire series of videos I did where I went through the electric universe. I wouldn't say it's deprecated, I would just say it's an older thing. We've already gone over those. Into the plasma electromagnetic cosmology, there are lots of different sections, including quantum information, atomic models, gravitation. And there are some pretty big names that have been covered. So you can always use the search bar in order to find them. And then finally, there's the Ancient Kentucky Historical Association, which is around a 30-year-old organization, but has ties back to one of the oldest alt-stream communities in history, because the Filson Historic Society was in search of the so-called Welsh Indians. And the AKHA has continued to look at the runes, which we now know these Colburn runes are plasmaglyphics. And this is how the Cherokee and the Celtic peoples were able to communicate, and also with the Allegui, that they all understood the basic meaning of all of these glyphs. They weren't long sentences as we use them. They were usually kind of, staccato in their presentation, but they are translatable. And that work out of Wilson and Blackett is incredibly important. And if you're not connected to the true King Arthur research, here's a way you can get directly connected. And also you can find all the archive newsletters posted up here on the Gateway. The final thing that I'll say is that in my directory, you'll see a couple of highlighted red options. Those are books. One of them is free. It's The Art of Chess. That one is a free one. Another one is also free, The Conquering the Solar System. And you can click on the Google Doc or download, if you would, the PDF. And then I do have a book for sale. It's a non-EPMC related per se. However, there is some MIMS, some of these MIMS papers ended up in that book. So you can actually find this book online at Amazon.com. It's Luda Burning House. It is available in hardcover or softcover. But again, the papers are actually present in the cosmology. So if you prefer not to purchase it, you could theoretically just go through this directory and download various strategy series papers, etc. And so that's the only main advertisement I will do outside of this. There are some tools and various maps, models, and again, a list of, for as far as the MEMS, what are the different X.Y categories. That's all I have to present about the cosmology itself.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for joining in during Ramon Shifu's part of this conference and his presentation. He also has another one. We'll see you back for the next presenter.